Live. We are here every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, shining a light on the current challenges and big topics for today's leaders. Reena Dayal, an executive coach and leadership accelerator, and myself, Maria Chase, an applied neuroscience coach, are here every second and fourth Tuesday, looking under the hood of what's going on in the world, looking at what may be hidden in plain sight. We're here to make a difference in the world that we live in, start conversations, get closer to topics. So without more ado, I shall hand over to Reena, the co-host. It's called TBQ Live because it leverages the 9 levers in her book, The Brilliance Quotient. So over to you, Reena, to start talking about what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you so much, Maria. And hello and welcome everyone to the Confidence Matrix. This is an exciting topic that Maria and I have been delving about with our clients and speaking between us for some time. And we thought it'll be a really good idea to bring it up and start delving, as Maria said, go beneath the hood and see what is it that confidence is all about. In fact, have you ever been in the presence of someone who is extremely confident and probably somebody who holds their space, who's speaking very eloquently, does not seem to be second guessing themselves, and are very, very clear about their thinking process? It's magnetic, isn't it? Such people just draw us to them. And perhaps you can reflect sometimes when you've been in a meeting and you're connecting with somebody who's there in the room who's speaking, and perhaps the content is very not very strong but has the gift of the gab, and it's speaking so much of confidence and is speaking so eloquently that the person is commanding the attention and space of everyone. It's frustrating, but it's also enviable. And I think so what's common between these individuals, and can come across many such instances, is that they have something what we call confidence. And it's something that makes people follow them because they have a charm, they have a certain energy, they have a pull that you want to be drawn towards them. So we're very keen to kind of go beneath the surface and say, what is confidence and why do we feel low or high confidence? And we're going to go a little bit into the science. And Maria and I love this topic, decided that we're going to delve deeper into it and take an example of something which is very common called the imposter syndrome. And we're going to talk about the science and art of combating it. So not only are we going to go into the science, we're going to give you some pretty neat ideas on how you could perhaps raise your self-confidence or indeed the self-confidence of your team members. Because we recognize today leaders are doing a lot of leading themselves, but also their teams who might be experiencing low confidence. We're also going to be thrashing some of the cognitive biases around confidence and also going to be sharing some neuro and bio hacks to challenge what we call autopilot thinking and dispel fear and negative thinking. It's lovely to see that some people are joining us. So, hi to you, Naresh. We can see you on the chat. Absolutely delighted. So, yes, do share your questions and your comments as we carry on. So, let's crack on and ask that big question about what is confidence. So, for a second, if you were to think about when you are feeling confident, what is it that you experience? Just going to give you literally 2 seconds for some words to come up in your mind as you're listening to this. And if you were to think about low confidence, what comes up in your mind? What do you experience when you are feeling low confidence or when you watch other people having high or low confidence? In fact, I noted down a few things that often comes up in a lot of workshop and client sessions that we do. And Maria, feel free to add on to some of these. So when people are experiencing high confidence, what is it that they do? So I mentioned some of them already, right? They trust their decisions, they don't second guess themselves, they display composure. Even though they are having some conflicting conversation, they're not easily offended. They actually feel that they can celebrate other people as well in the room, so they don't have that insecurity. They feel almost comfortable in their own skin. That's another phrase that comes out very often when you're talking to people. They feel it's okay to say, I don't know. at certain times and don't feel that pressure that they need to have all the answers. They also physically have a very open body posture. So
Hmm.
when they're actually in that space, so which is what we say, they're commanding the space. They have an open body posture. So these are some of the things that I see that come up often when people are talking about confidence, and there are many others, but these are the ones that often get repeated. What comes up for you, Maria, when you're talking before we go into low confidence? What kind of things comes up to your mind or in your sessions when people are talking about high level of confidence?
I think one of the things that comes up most when someone's feeling confident, they're okay to make mistakes. They don't perceive it as a personal failure. They just see it as a learning journey. And that is so, so powerful because it allows a growth mindset and means that it actually cascades, the confidence itself cascades. Because if they are speaking and do make a mistake, that's funny, that's fine. They don't get overawed by that moment in time. And I think what you said is so powerful as well, comfortable in the skin. You can really feel when someone's just happy to be standing there, having the entire audience look at them. That's not a problem for them. When we're less confident, that can become a bit of a challenge, having all eyes on you in the room. Absolutely.
Indeed, you almost feel stumped. And in fact, we're going to be talking a bit around the imposter syndrome that people experience when they're having low confidence. And here's something that you might see your team members experiencing when they're experiencing low confidence, or indeed when you have moments of low confidence. So, one thing is about people feeling that they're unclear.
Mm,
There's something happens that they find that they're stumped for words. They can't
mm,
speak. There's lots of thoughts going through their mind. And that's something that spins off. And then they feel, oh my gosh, I can't speak up at any point of time. People also question their self worth. And so
mm,
they're almost second guessing themselves or saying, really, does anybody want to listen to me in this room? Should I even speak up? Should I bother? So those are some of the thinking that comes out, which shows up as a person who might be very quiet, very hesitant, might look actually nervous at when they're being spoken to, or as Maria was talking, almost feels uncomfortable that all eyes are drawn towards them. Uh, People tend to do too much of people pleasing as well. So
mhm,
they're so much into trying to get the attention or buy the confidence of other people. And because they have low confidence, they go into a people pleasing mode, which can be, of course, as you well know, it can be a little damaging for the person as well as for the brand that they're creating. Worry, self doubt, other things that come up often in the area of low confidence. Pessimistic, they end up being pessimistic. They start, trying to figure out everything is going wrong. They might go into a catastrophic kind of a mode. So there are a lot of things that people are experiencing in low confidence as well, right? And I'm sure
mm,
some of these resonate with you, or you've watched other people do it. So look, we know what the behaviors are. We know what's happening when we see somebody or when we experience somebody. We'd like to go beneath the hood and go to the
mm,
science behind what's happening inside us, because once we become aware of that, and something that we often talk about is knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is even more powerful, isn't it? and
yes.
and that's what we really want to get into, is what's happening inside the hood. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about a couple of concepts, and then Maria is going to build on it, on what's happening inside the brain. So for a moment, I want you to think about two words. The energy aspect is what I'm going to be focusing on. So, why is it that we want to talk about energy? One is, when we are talking about confidence, you would have recollected that we have made some statements around it draws other people to them. They feel not that good about themselves. So, what's happening, right? And so, for a second, I'm going to share a concept that we often share in TBQ Live, but fundamentally very important, which is about catabolic and anabolic energy. So stay with me in a moment while I go through that science. So, as human beings, what we need is energy. We get that aspect, right? But there are really two kinds of energy. Well, they're in a spectrum, but for a moment, let's make it easy and say there are two kinds of energy. Anabolic energy is when you and I are feeling a lot of things that we listed out in the high confidence level. It's actually things that when we are feeling happy, excited, comfortable in our own skin, and therefore we are able to speak eloquently. Often we come across people who feel really comfortable in their skin speaking with their friends and family, but not so when they are in a work situation or when they're under under the spotlight or under pressure, right? So anabolic energy is when you're feeling happy, excited, calm, peaceful. So it could be a high anabolic energy where you're really excited and pumped up to do things, or it could be a calm anabolic energy where you're feeling peaceful, when you feel almost meditative and centered, right? And it's a spectrum even in the anabolic energy. And what's happening in the body at that moment of time is there's certain chemicals and hormones that are being flushed through your body and your brain. And Murray is going to be talking more about those. But very simply, to pull out some of them, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, they're being flushed through your system that makes you feel all of those words that we've just talked about. And there's something that's triggering it, right? And we're going to come to that in a minute. So there's these lovely chemicals that are going through your body, which makes you feel more in charge, more confident, and gives you more choices to do more things, which means you have the choice of saying, I don't know, or I made a mistake and never mind, I will carry on in my life per se, right? So that's the other thing that we experience as well in anabolic energy is it gives you a variety of choices. It makes you more collaborative. It makes you far more thinking about new ideas. You can take risks. So that's anabolic energy. Catabolic energy, on the other side, is also another kind of energy that we as human beings experience and need. And it happens when there are certain chemicals, in fact, primarily two chemicals that are being flushed through your body, and chemicals that you've heard about, which is adrenal and cortisol. Now, let me caveat it. A little bit of catabolic energy is good because it pumps you up. Because what adrenal and cortisol does is that your body needs instant energy in the moment, and it doesn't have the time to really construct and do things that it does to create anabolic energy. And therefore, there's something happening. It's a trigger that takes place that releases these two hormones or chemicals in the body. And when it does, it gives you three choices by way of action. You're either in a fight mode, or a flight mode, or a freeze mode. And again, we're going to talk about a bit more around it. But hold that fact that catabolic energy is when we experience everything that we mentioned under low confidence because you're restricted. So if you think about it, I'm unclear, I'm stumped for vote. That's a freeze mode that might take place. Or as my voice might become very spiky because I'm now nervous and I'm speaking out. So, you're taking out another way, you're expressing that energy. It's that energy that's pumped, it's that chemical that's pumping through your body. And therefore, what really one needs to do when you're thinking about building up confidence, again, no surprises there, is to be able to move more into the anabolic zone. So even while in the instant, you might feel catabolic energy. So let me give you an example. I'm preparing for a presentation. I'm going to speak in front of 1,000 people. I have butterflies in my stomach. I'm feeling that adrenal coming into my system. That's good. Now, if I turn that into a spiral and start questioning my self-worth or no one's going to listen to me, guess what? I'm going to make a lousy presentation. But if I use that energy and move into the anabolic space whereby I'm feeling and thinking that I want to be, I'm going to make an impression, I'm going to trust myself. And so we're already revealing to you some techniques that you can use. Then you move into the anabolic space. And the minute you move into the anabolic space, there's a different set of chemicals running through your body. And when the different set of chemicals run through your body, you are behaving in a very, very different way. So, as human beings, just as a very quick summary before I pass it on, we will always experience catabolic and anabolic energy. It's nothing to do with men, women. It's a species conversation that's happening at this moment of time. But too much of catabolic energy can become harmful, not only in leading to low confidence, it can lead into deeper issues. Because if there's constant low confidence, there can be a lot of disorders. There can be anxiety, there can be depression. People start going into questioning their self worth and start realizing that they can't really do anything and feel almost like a victim. So it can lead to a lot of trouble. So, therefore, if you spot it in other people, it's a great way to help them out before they spiral into that particular element. I'm going to pause that for a second because I'd love us to now go deeper and try to understand what's happening in the brain while I've just unpacked a bit of it. So, Maria, over to you.
Thank you so much, Reena. And it's such an important point. We have all of this energy, is whether it serves us or not, and how we can leverage it to make sure that it serves us. So the thing about confidence is it's a feeling. It's not actually hardwired as an behavior. Confidence is always a feeling, which is why I say that it's on a spectrum. There are days when very, very confident people will doubt themselves. There are also days when very unconfident people will feel like they can conquer the world. And that's because it's a biochemical cocktail that gives us the feeling of confidence that then allows us to act through that feeling to the actions and behaviors that seem confident and are so attracting to other people. So, taken from the Confidence Code, a very recent book out reviewed in the Harvard Review list, there's a great quote that says, when dopamine, and dopamine is the hormone which motivates us, it moves us into action. It's also about curiosity. Dopamine's also about risk taking. Yeah. So when we have this dopamine in our bloodstream going through, and it's commingled with serotonin. Now, serotonin is the happy hormone, sometimes called. It's when we're calm. It's when we feel snuggly. It's when we are feeling very comforted. So it induces a calm thought, and then combine the dopamine and the serotonin with oxytocin. And oxytocin, known as the cuddle hormone, is the one that generates that warm and positive attitude towards others. All of this chemical cocktail brings us to that sense of, I feel confident. I have a biochemical cocktail coursing through my veins, which give me that confident feeling. And also is using everything you say about the anabolic energy as opposed to the catabolic energy. It's really important to know that actually our genes play a big role in whether we produce and how much of these hormones we actually produce. So, for example, the hormone which actually activates and delivers serotonin, the gene that delivers serotonin can actually have a version of that gene which gives you low optimism and low self-esteem. But what's really great about any kind of biology, now that the science is really, really coursing forward, is a field called epigenetics, which means that I may have a hormone that means I don't get a great deal of serotonin. However, what I do, what I think, and what I feel, and the environment I live in and how I live means that I can actually negate the expression of that gene and still fill myself with serotonin. So it's really important to make that note that we may have certain genetic predispositions, but we can still overcome our genetic disposition by thinking, feeling, and action. Another really important part of the biochemical cocktail is testosterone, which is why very often men can seem more confident than women because their testosterone levels are higher. And there was a great piece of research that showed under the age of 25, only 30% of women said that they felt confident, whereas 50% of men did. However, that changes as women get older, and by 60, women are much, much more confident, 29% more confident than men. So that also speaks to how confidence is something that it's a spectrum that flows over time. The difficulty is cortisol, which is the stress hormone. It gets a bad rap. It's about stressing what's important. Where do I put my awareness? That's part of that catabolic energy cocktail that says, okay, I need quick, rapid energy. Cortisol means that suddenly I can free up a lot of energy from my system. It stops the digestive system going, which is why we get those butterflies in our tummy. So it's about knowing that when you're under stress, when you're angry, when you're in that fight, flight, or freeze that you were talking about, Reena, our confidence is going to be dampened down by the cortisol that is flooding through our system. So it's really worthwhile thinking around the fact that actually confidence is a feeling. It's not a hardwired system like walking. I learned to walk at whatever age, around 2. And then I have a circuit that means that I can always walk unless something happens. Confidence is actually something that is a biochemical cocktail, which is why it goes up and why it goes down. Now, don't get me wrong, you can start to do more and more behaviors which allow you to create pathways that allow you to have a baseline of confidence that's higher than when you first started. That's about neuroplasticity. That's another entire TBQ live podcast that actually is in the archive. So if you're interested in neuroplasticity, take a look back at the archive. And this shows, in terms of, it's a biochemical cocktail, and how that cocktail is playing out is a key to why we get imposter syndrome and what's happening when we get imposter syndrome. Because in real terms, it's been very pathologized. You say to anyone imposter syndrome, they know what you're talking about. I have so many clients after 18 months to 2 years of a global epidemic who feel suddenly a bit more imposter syndrome than they had before. That's because we're more stressed. We have a baseline of stress we didn't have prior to the epidemic. So that's cortisol flooding through our system. And the problem with the brain, just because it's keeping us alive, so it's a great survival tactic, it's not a great thriving tactic, is that negative always screams, because that's danger of death. And our very ancient limbic system is constantly scanning. Is there threat? Is there threat? Is this good for me? Is this bad for me? And if anything, even the smallest thing is considered negative, that is turned up, and positive just whispers. So negative always is much louder and much more enforceful in the moment, and also in the memory, which means that we recall much more vividly times when we made a mistake in front of loads of people, when we didn't deliver the report on time, when our production wasn't of the quality that we wanted. And those are etched and encoded in much more deeply than the things we did really well. I mean, we've all had that thing where the manager goes, oh, you did this amazingly, that was fantastic, that was awesome, there's just this bit, and everyone suddenly hones in on that. And that's a living example of the fact that we take more notice of the negative. The trick, the biohack, is our framing. Because if we are stood there going, actually, a mistake is a portal, it's an opportunity, like Edison said, he did how many experiments before he got the light bulb right? And he said each one was a learning experience. It wasn't a mistake. He didn't get it wrong. It was just a new way to inform his next attempt. So it's about how we frame mistakes. It's how we frame how other people are perceiving us. We'll get more to the cognitive biases later. But like you said, Reena, that people-pleasing mode that we go into, actually, it's if we're trying to please people, we're assuming that we know what they want. Whereas if we're framing something from our center and we're being centered in ourselves and being kind to ourselves, understanding our biochemistry is actually up for grabs. We called it the Matrix because we both love the film, don't we, Reena? We both adore the film. The thing about the Matrix is you get to create your own reality. Neo uploaded a program and suddenly he could fly a helicopter or whatever. And that's the kind of perspective that I would love people to look at when it comes to confidence. We can tell ourselves certain phraseologies that allow us to feel more confident. We can actually pose and make certain movements, and the brain was made to move us. So movement and action is most powerful. Amy Cuddy looks to do things like power posing, the Wonder Woman pose. All of us feel more powerful when we act that way. And when we do that, it gives a very clear indication to our brain what chemistry to start flowing through our bloodstream. So chemistry, what we do, how we do it makes a difference to the chemical cocktail that says either I feel confident or I feel less confident. The thing that's really important is we can change that in the moment, at the time, or given some time to actually sort that out. Okay, I've spoken quite a long time, Reena. Are there anything you want to say about that, or should we go on to the other
A couple of
songs?
things. A couple of things that let me just build on it. So let me just summarize, because I do understand that we love this subject and we can get into a lot of details around it, and I'm hoping that you're finding it useful. When there are two things that we're trying to say fundamentally. One is, if you want to know how to raise your confidence, not just on those moments when you're feeling low, but generally feel more confident about life, then understand the science of what's happening inside you. Because when you do, it throws a spotlight and gives you ideas on how you can shift your energy level. Because as Maria was correctly saying, confidence is a feeling. We feel that spark of low or high confidence. And when we're saying we're feeling that low confidence at any moment of time, it is because a chemical is raging through our body because we are feeling threatened or we're feeling it's an uncomfortable situation. So we all have those moments. Then what the mind does, it creates an interpretation of what's happening at that moment of time. And it is that interpretation of what's happening at that moment of time which is the real game changer. Because if I interpret it that I'm going for a big presentation and I'm going to make my mark and I have a chance to express my thoughts, I can move into the anabolic space because it triggers off a different chemical, or lovely, I love the word cocktail that you're talking about. But if at that moment of time, I actually kind of move away from that particular area and see it as a threat, i.e., people are not going to listen to me, I'm not dressed well, my voice is not good enough, it shifts the energy and keeps it down the track of adrenaline. And that snowballs the feeling of I'm feeling even less confident. So that spark where that when you're feeling low confidence, you have an opportunity to change it around and how you want to express yourself. And we talked about imposter syndrome, and we'd like to go a little bit more into the deeper into it. But what do we mean by imposter syndrome? Now, imposter syndrome is often expressed by a lot of people about, and I've experienced that in the early part of my career a lot as well. When you're up there, you're talking with people, and suddenly you feel that, oh my gosh, nobody really wants to listen to me. You feel like a fraud. You're like, actually, I'm not worth it. I don't have enough expertise to be talking about. So you start second guessing yourself. In fact, one of my clients expressed it in a very nice way of saying, I almost feel that a neon sign is there on my forehead saying, I'm a fraud, don't listen to me. And it's blinking away. And she feels at that moment of time, she's sweating. In my case, it used to be my face used to flush. So there's a physical element that we experience as well when we are having that low confidence feeling, right? So one of the questions that people have often asked us, and Maria's already started touching upon it, is trying to explain what is happening and how you can move out of it, is what do you do? How do you overcome this low confidence, right? Here's a simple three-step process that we want to give. Now, it sounds simple, and it is simple. It does require a bit of a work. And the reason why it needs a bit of a work is that while confidence is something that can come and go, if you constantly keep interpreting situations to lower and lower confidence, actually it can get pretty strong. In a way, it almost gets, and I know I'm using the word carefully, it can get hardwired into the way that you're always interpreting the situation and snowball into the other things. Now, the good news about neuroplasticity is that you can replace that reaction so that you can interpret it differently, and then over a period of time it can become a habit, and then you're suddenly hardwired in yourself how you can constantly feel confident irrespective of the situation that reaches you. So what's the three-step process? The first is to understand what's the narrative, or recognize the narrative that is there happening inside the head. And for each one of us, the narrative is quite unique. For some people, the narrative, or what I call the little voice that inside us that says you're not good enough, or says actually don't bother speaking because nobody wants to listen to you, or actually really you think that you've got more knowledge than everybody around the room, don't talk. So there's a little voice that inside us that snowballs or triggers off that low confidence spark that I was talking about. So recognize it, because sometimes in that entire chatter we don't really listen to what's that starting point that snowballs, that gremlin as and snowballs into something bigger. Once you recognize that gremlin voice inside you and what it says to you each time that you're feeling low confidence, think about a circuit breaker. And this goes back to the point that I was just raising, that what your mind is doing is when it's interpreting something, what the brain does literally is takes the stimuli of the environment or what I'm experiencing at the moment, and therefore takes it back brain and gives it a storyboard, right? And that's what I call a neurological pathway that gets created between stimuli and the reaction inside your body, where certain parts of the brain get triggered, which we have often covered in many TBQ lives, and we won't get into it right now. And that then snowballs into that chemical reaction that I was talking about, metabolic, catabolic, or anabolic, and right? So therefore, there is a particular way. And so every time I'm saying, and I'm going to go back to the same example to make it easier, every time I'm making a presentation or whatever that makes you feel low confidence, your body reacts in a particular way because of that chemical or that neurological pathway. So what you want to do is you want to break it. You want to create a circuit breaker. And when that circuit breaker comes up, it gives you that moment to think about other way of behaving at that moment of time, or another way to react. And some of these circuit breakers, and we've put and some of them that we share with people often, is to ask yourself this question: am I overthinking? Because sometimes when the gremlin starts speaking, you start overthinking, and right from the thing about butterflies in the stomach, it goes on to, I'm not good enough and nobody in the world ever wants to listen to me, and therefore I'm never ever going to speak ever in another presentation, right? So to ask yourself, am I overthinking? And that question, the minute you ask, you start engaging a beautiful part of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex. And the minute the question is asked, the prefrontal cortex then starts being rational and giving an answer, which is what is the circuit breaker. And it says, am I overthinking? Yeah, maybe I'm overthinking. All right, so then what is the reality? Well, the reality is that I'm a bit nervous. You're going to give a presentation, and this is a subject that I really know. So suddenly you're moving towards anabolic energy, right? Another one, which is my all-time favorite, is it a thought or a fact? Sometimes when you're in a conflict situation, you start making an interpretation about why the other person is behaving in a particular way, and therefore the person is out to get you. And then you sometimes stop yourself and say, is it a thought or is it a fact? Oh, it's a thought. Right. So thoughts could be interpretations, which means I could change them. Suddenly you're using your PFC, right? Another great circuit breaker to ask in the moment of low confidence is, what would someone else do? And it might be somebody who's your role model, somebody who you think is super confident all the time, or somebody who's been your mentor. Almost ask that question, what would they do? And again, it gives you a moment of new choices, because you're trying to move out of the fight, flight, freeze, and you're trying to open up new choices. And again, the one that one of my clients said is her all-time favorite is, am I making a mountain out of a molehill? In fact, this is her phrases, and I loved it. It is because it might be a small thing, and it might be a nod or an expression of somebody in the room in a meeting that you interpret and make it into such a big thing, and then you stop talking. So these are circuit breakers which you're giving so that your neurological pathway gets cut off and gives you a chance to do something more. Now, the question is, you might do it once, but you want to make it a habit because you want to create that new neurological pathway that we often talk about, right? And when you're trying to create the new neurological pathway, is what you're trying to do is interpret it in a different way. In other words, to experience neuroplasticity, you need to start having certain bio and neuro hacks, which can get you to then make a new habit, so that you can now interpret the situation which you thought as threatful, or something which was stressful, or which kind of created that low confidence in you. You suddenly start seeing it as an opportunity, i.e., in a very simplistic way, you start seeing the glass half full rather than half empty. So you're making that shift, but so you have to make it a habit, you have to practice it. And once you practice it, it becomes a habit. And then you start being confident generally, as if it was something which was second skin to you. It's like when you're learning a new language, it feels clumsy, your brain tries to resist it, you can't get the words forming out. But once you learn it and you practice it, you start speaking Spanish or Indian or Italian or whatever it might be, right? It's the same process that you're trying to do when you're trying to build up confidence. You keep practicing circuit and new things that can become a hack, a bio or a neuro hack, which are some things that we would like to talk about in a minute. And once you do that, it becomes a habit. So when that same situation comes in of having a presentation, you still feel that adrenal kick because it's uncomfortable. But because you have now created a new way to interpret it, you suddenly become far more confident in your behavior and the kind of energy that's coursing through your body, which results in more anabolic energy. And then you start experiencing the opportunity. You start noticing people who are nodding towards you in the meeting, and so suddenly you're picking up cues that build up your anabolic energy. In fact, I love, Maria, for you to step in right now and talk about some of those bio neuro hacks, and then I'll sum up on some of those and go into the final myth buster that we're going to do on confidence.
Thank you so much, Reena. It's so fascinating. One of the things you said about the adrenaline, it's changing that and using it as a kickstart. I thought that was so powerful because we're going to get it anyway. So which way are we going to take it? The other thing that is a great biohack is emotional awareness. There is a caveat though. Emotions are huge. The brain uses emotions first as a broad brushstroke. So it's also looking and perceiving emotions as data points, they're information. It's seeing what the emotion is, not always being all of that emotion, because the minute we get dragged into the emotion, we're in the limbic system, the C, like you said, the rational thinking part of our brain gets dampened down. So it's looking at emotional awareness in a what's this about? Rather than this is I'm feeling like this. Actually, what's this feeling? What's it giving me? What's it telling me? What way is it asking me to direct my energy? Some people adore adrenaline. There are adrenaline junkies out there who just want to do things and take massive risks because they enjoy the feeling. Some people absolutely dislike how that feeling feels, being full of adrenaline. So it's also getting to know yourself. When I say emotional energy, awareness also, what's it telling me and who am I? What am I like? Because the more we know what we're like, the more we can get the best out of ourselves. It's like having a manual to yourself. Just like neuroscience is like having a manual for the brain and how it works, knowing what your emotional responses are like gives you great data. Oh, I get annoyed when things like that happen, or that really enthuses me, or actually, I'm kind of meh about that. That's information and data points, and it's not judging them. It's being curious. The cure for judgment is curiosity. The second biohack is physical movement changes our psychology. And it's as simple as if you smile for over 15 seconds, the actual sequence that the muscles are activated tells your brain to shoot out some serotonin, whether you like it or not, whether you feel good or not. So it's always worthwhile leveraging the physiology of what is going on. If you're not feeling okay, if you're feeling, you can see when someone is low confidence, they close in on themselves. Tony Robbins, the master of coaching, always says there's depressed, but movements and there are positive movements. If you put your shoulders back, you feel better. There are many things. Amy Cuddy, as I've spoken to before, has a great TED talk on the power of the body to change the psychology. So it's really important to know that if you can't do it in your mind, and we can't always do it in the moment, do it with your body. How many people get really frustrated and angry? Take a walk, take a 5-minute walk. Nowadays, post-COVID, everyone's, happy to say, I need a 10-minute walk. So leverage the body if the psychology is doing your head in, or leverage the psychology if your body needs some more movement. Look at yourself and go, okay, I need to put my shoulders back. Yeah.
I love that.
Perfect.
I love that. And in fact, that Amy Cuddy's example that he gave is such an exciting one because they've actually done an interesting research in which, and this was, and she does say that science is evolving. So we must caveat that whatever we are sharing
Mm.
is an evolution. It's a science that's changing and emerging, and we're learning more and more. But we know enough to actually start making some great applications around it as well. So Amy Cuddy did this very, very quickly, did this kind of a research. There were two groups of people who had to be interviewed, and one of them were asked to be in an expansive posture. So sit straight, have their arms out, or be standing with their arms, their hands on the hip. So literally a very expansive posture they were asked to do. And the other group was not said told to do anything as such. And typically, if you ever go to somebody who's in the waiting room of an interview, most of them like scrunched up over their notes, clicking through the pages, they're trying to make a phone call. So they're in a far more constricted posture per se. And then the interviews took place, and there was a blind interview, i.e., the people who were on the interview panel didn't know which group the people were coming from. And in every case, the people who were in that high posture and that posture of openness scored higher.
Mhm.
When they tested the chemical, what they realized is the people with the expansive posture, and there were men and women in it, had higher testosterone level and lower cortisol level. Whereas the other group, which were in a much more constrictive posture by nature, what we normally do, they were in a very different position whereby their cortisol levels were very, very high and the testosterone had dropped, which is the connection that we were making. So, what we are also sharing with you now in these sins is emotions. Being aware of it, as Maria was talking about, might be a great way to build up that anabolic energy and thinking within you, where you're curious, where you're grateful. So I could be grateful that I'm giving a presentation and getting a chance to express my views to people, right? Instead of feeling nervous and nobody really wants to listen to me. So really mean using your emotions as data points and harnessing the anabolic ones are a great way to create a habit. Physical movement that we've just talked about as well. Also making circuit breakers a habit, because you need to teach yourself to break that current thinking of low confidence, right? So what might be it? Maybe it's one of the questions that we shared earlier with you, right, in our chat in a few minutes ago. Maybe it's one of those. Or it could be something like, I want to be curious in this moment, as Maria was talking about. Trust myself. That's one that works for me really
Mm.
well as well. Or be like, I'm going to take a pause and take a glass of water. Or actually tell somebody in the meeting of saying, I need a moment to think through this problem that has been put forward. So have a script that's ready in your mind, or what you want to say, which becomes your circuit breaker that you're using time and again, that space to start creating new choices for yourself. Then also identify anabolic triggers. What makes you feel confident? Is it when you're spending time with your family? Is it time on your own? For me personally, sometimes before a presentation or before a workshop, I like to just be on my own for a bit. Just be without having a conversation with anyone. And that's an anabolic trigger to me. So start spotting times when you are feeling, because Maria said, we all have moments when we are feeling confident. Dial that up. Do
Mm.
more of that. Because the more you do that, the more opportunities and more practice you'll have of using those as well. Then it's about using the people around you. What's your supportive network? Who can you go and talk to when you're feeling low and out, right? So those would be another way to really build up your anabolic kind of a reservoir of energy, if that's what I was to call. And last but not the least, perhaps use a little bit of humor and empathy. That's a very powerful way to be able to change the dynamics, not only on what you're feeling, but also what they're experiencing. And when I mean humor and empathy, humor you could use as humor on yourself, like making light of it, of saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm feeling nervous right now, and it happens to me all the time. But give me a moment, and I can talk about it." So maybe it's using humor on yourself, or it could be humor in the room of saying, "Oh, there is a silent pause in the room. I wonder what that means. Did should I?" So use humor if you something easier. Empathy, be empathetic towards yourself is what we would love to say. Is really be empathetic to yourself, because it can be difficult. And as Maria said, it's been a stressful time. So therefore, that's something that's important. Okay, so I'm very conscious of time. We've got literally a couple of minutes. So we just want to end on one last note, and then we'd love to sign off. Is the myth we want to bust, and maybe Maria, we should make this into our next conversation on TBQ live as well, because it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
The myth we want to bust is, what is perceived as confidence within an organization, within the system, within society, and
Mhm.
we'd like to challenge that, because some of the confident behaviors that people typically consider as confidence are behaviors that we have expressed in the past and which might not really have any behind it, and we might want to challenge it. So I'm tempted to just leave you behind with that question about, think about the confident behaviors that see around the system, which is confident or low confidence, and think about challenging it, because we'll come back in another TBQ live and challenge it real proper to set ourselves some time around it. What do you think, Maria?
I think that's a great idea. I don't think we should rush something that's quite so big. And a summing up note that I would love to do just before you introduce what our next topic is in the next second Tuesday. Will it be the second or the fourth? It will be the fourth Tuesday of April. The last thing I want to say is we've talked about ourselves, we've talked about other people, the magneticism of confidence. And to go back to Nelson Mandela's speech, his inauguration speech, which was written by Marianne Williamson, which also came from the Book of Miracles. And that's like, we were meant to shine. Confidence actually inspires other people. And it's so easy to try and dampen ourselves down. You were talking about people pleasing. We don't want to stand out. But actually, being confident is the most attractive thing that makes other people happy to be confident. Anyway, we could talk about this longer, and we're going to, because we've just said another one will be focused on this. So, Reena, if you want to talk about which topic you are going to be covering in the next TBQ Live, that would be great before we sign off and say thank you for everyone's time.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Maria. Absolutely. Why bother trying to fit in when you can stand out, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in the fourth Tuesday of April, we're going to be talking about reading technology. And I'm going to be joined by two amazing panelists in this conversation. And this is all from the space about we believe that the way to really change the world is to reframe, is to rethink and challenge the status quo. Exactly what we were talking about, change the neurological pathways of how we interpret things around us. To talk about how can you rethink technology in a post-COVID war-torn world. I'm going to be joined by Rosie Contractor from Wipro, General Manager, and she's going to give an amazing insights from the world of corporate. And I'm going to be joined by Daryl Arjun, who is actually a serial entrepreneur. And both of them, I'm delighted to say, along with Maria and myself, form part of an exciting program called the Ascent Leadership that we will talk about a bit more next time. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. This is Maria and Reena signing off. TBQ Live, there for you every second and fourth Tuesday. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Maria. Bye for
Thank
now.
you, Reena. Bye for now.